Perfect. Welcome back. In this session, Mind the Gap, Science in Progress, we would like to talk about the black box of research. What happens in the gaps between a research idea, the proposal, and the final publication? What kind of challenges, doubts, setbacks, failures, and surprises do we encounter along the way? And more importantly, how do we solve them? What are the silver linings of failure and challenges, and how do these help us to get to where we want to be with our research and with our careers? We are very lucky to have with us today Professor Dr. Wolfgang Wick to talk about these topics and share with us his experiences in his scholarships and career path in getting where he is today, as well as two fellows who were introduced before, Chris and Raphael, to talk about the same topics and also challenging situations or creative solutions that they have encountered so far. So before we get to your input, let me introduce Professor Wick, for those of you who don't know him yet. Professor Wick is a current chair of the German Science and Humanity Council, professor of neurology, and medical doctor of the Department of Neurology at the Heidelberg University Hospital. He completed his PhD at Bonn University and his medical training at the Neurological Clinic of the University Hospital Tübingen. Since 2014, he has been the chair of neurology at the University of Heidelberg and medical director of the Neurological Clinic, as well as spokesman of the Kopf Clinic in Heidelberg. Professor Wick's work and research focus on the treatment of brain tumors, especially glioblastoma. His work includes over 700 academic publications and has been awarded with a number of awards, including the Atempo Prize for Neurobiology and the German Cancer Prize. Professor Wick, the floor is yours.
Okay, this is very kind. Thank you very much. This is really kind, and I think I'd like to congratulate you first for doing this, to taking this challenge, to being a Marsilius Fellow. I think this is one of the things probably you will not forget in your life, because it has been something which has been outside your immediate career step. And those things, at least for me, have been always important, that I try to do things that not immediately follow a certain project or a certain aim or goal, because there is where you get to know people that probably are in the future, without now knowing and thinking about this, helpful for your next steps. So this probably first. And second, and this may help in this topic, which I found extremely difficult to address. I've already given 2 presentations today, so it's a really specific day, because our SFB had a seminar and my project was on, so I had to present my project. So this was one. This was easy, because it's really in the midst of my research. Second, I had to talk about the German Science and Humanities Council in an older people's group of people, all professors, whatever. This was also not too difficult. This is really difficult, because I know that your expectations may be really high, that I find some take-home messages that are really essential. Yes, and this is difficult. So first, when I aimed at studying, I wanted to study physics. So I finished school and really wanted to become a physicist. This was my aim. Natural sciences, all natural sciences, and more physics than biology. I did civil service because at that time, 1998, when I did my A-levels, there was compulsory military service. We had a prolongation of this, and I spent 1.5 years in a hospital. This 1.5 years switched me to become a medical doctor. So I'm really one of those people, you can laugh about this, who think this is really something you should do. I was motivated to be a medical doctor. When I wrote my application to the German Scholarship Foundation, I told them that I can never think about doing science, because my impact in medicine will be so important for me that I only can envisage becoming a local doctor, some kind of a physician somewhere in a very rural area, and this would be, which is kind of strange looking at this back today, but I was really convinced that this was my way, and this is how I did my medical studies. I did my thesis. I did a 3-year science thesis because I thought this is important to do at least one at that time. And this was in neuro-oncology, and I never left this. And what I learned from other people, and we've done in the German Neuro-Oncology Society, German Cancer Society, a bigger survey some years ago, the most important switch or step for a career is actually the MD or PhD thesis. So this is what there's nothing else that is so predictive of a future career in science than this part of the thesis. And we may debate about this, whether this is true for you as well. Now I take a second look at this. The second look is rather conventional. We have funding constraints. This is something which for all of us in the system prior to getting a position that is permanent, a difficult task. And this is something where we all could think about changes, because the funding system as it is probably is unfair. And it's probably very much biased towards certain topics or towards certain institutions or even certain people. So this is something which is difficult. Mentorship and guidance, and I can tell you that on the one hand, me personally as a human being, I like and love to be a mentor. This is something I'm really probably even good at, but time is a real big issue. So my proposal there is, I had very illustrious people I had the privilege to work with, but to call them a mentor is difficult because I only met them once a year for half an hour. So great people, but you have to be very creative yourself to take what you may take from them. One of them has always been there for me, even now. Yeah, he's now president of the Helmholtz Society of Wiesler. So this was my supervisor of my thesis in Bonn. But I only met him also in my thesis once a year, honestly, not more often. But when I met him, it was very, very important. It was enlightening. It was motivating. And I tried to be such a kind of a mentor myself, at least at a small level. But this is turning moments. But I would advise someone else to say that this has missed in my career more than once. That I had someone at a medium level to be able to talk to be openly discussing both the impact on my private or my social situation, but also on my scientific situation, and not only those superheroes, because the superheroes at the end have a certain path which is probably singular, and it's very important for us to take from those heroes the one few things that they may have which also important for us. So this is difficult. Work-life balance, this is in hindsight, of course, always difficult. I think in science at some point there is always a time when the work-life balance is not so great. I think it's important to acknowledge. Whether you feel it or not very much depends on whether you like the team or not. So my I think biggest advice there would be, don't do your research in an environment that is unpleasant. If you don't like the environment, just stop. And really early in your, even if it is the best lab in the world for your part of research, I would stop. I would not continue. Also not in a toxic environment, not in a bad environment. But I think I would work long hours, so I would not have difficulties with that. There are institutional biases and politics that are not helpful. This is also something where I would say I would be actively trying to overcome or not work in an institution that has difficulties in accepting that we don't like this kind of biases. The problem with career positions is a severe problem, I would say, for all of you who work in technical science or in medical science, even in natural science. This may be less of a problem for the ones who live and work in cultural science and social science. This is difficult. And this is a problem that we need to tackle. And I can tell you now from my work as in the Wissenschaftsrat that career positions beyond the professorship is the most important topic we are working on now in one of our commissions, because this is really on attraction, on attractivity for science. This is not to fulfill all promises for scientists. This is really because science needs to be attractive. It of course also can be a nice person and say it's because you need to get a great position, but this is not politically active. Politically active if we say, okay, we need those positions to maintain really great people in science, otherwise we'll lose those people, and I think it's going to be attractive. The problem with career transitions and gaps is that we will have aspects that cannot be solved. You'll have to live in Heidelberg, but somewhere in Cottbus is the best option for your research, or vice versa. Yeah? And this is a decision you need to take. I had the privilege to go from Bonn to Tübingen. I found Tübingen really strange in the first couple of years. But you probably find every place strange where you only know the lab and the clinic and your own bed and the Mensa. And this is probably not about Tübingen. So, and I got to love Tübingen at some point, because when you start to do a little bit more social activity rather than working, this is also helpful. I do now a third round. I've put down a couple of hurdles that I found important. For me, it is difficult to match my science, basic and clinical science, my clinical duties, the things that today I like to do in public or for organizations, and of course some private life as well. I have two kids, 13 and 17. One did just Abitur last week. And I think what is very important, and what is always a problem, probably also in your career stage, is that we have a fear of missing out. And trust me, it's also valid in my situation. And you may think, hey, if this man has enough, he is a chair of something, he earns a lot of money, and this is all good, but still you think there might be an opportunity that you miss. And honestly, if you follow what you really want to do, and this is science now, or your clinical work, it is easier to dismiss some of those options. And over the past years, I had to cancel a lot of things, because in addition to my clinic and my research, this Wissenschaftsrat job is really a lot of time. It's really time consuming. So I'm not attending many conferences anymore, and I don't miss it, and they don't miss me. So it's working. So I attend conferences, but not 10, 12, 15 times a year anymore, but once or twice. I give a lot of seminars now in online or local, or when it is possible, and this is working. And I think you can now translate it to your situation, and this is the same. I have to understand to co-sign a lot of applications for travel for my junior co-workers, and some of them do 1 or 2 conferences a year, and some do 10. And I'm not sure that the one with a 10 are the one with a successful science, because this conference attending is nice and socially very attractive, and it also helps you to generate some ideas, but on the other hand, it distracts you from your work. And I think you need to have something to say at each conference you attend, and not just be around. Second, we have a difficulty with implementation speed and the funding we get. So there's a bad synchronization with the funding we get and the right time to spend the money. So you can say this is a luxury problem, but it's a problem at very many levels. So you get a grant of 10,000 euro and you want to finish something else, and you do not really spend this money. Most of the research we are doing is not really suffering from insufficient resources, but we have not the right resources at the right time. And this is for me now a really big problem. I got a lot of money from the Hauptstiftung and for a European Center for Neuro-Oncology, which I think is just right. But this time it's very difficult for me to make steps there because so it's a lot of money. So it's not the money. It's really having the ideas, doing the implementation steps, doing this. And my lesson, which I have to learn now, is I have to cancel a few things, otherwise this money will be gone. And this would be very sad because it was a lot of work to get the money, but this is happening to many of my colleagues as well. So it's not the money, it's more that you need then to focus and really be ready for the money. Maintaining the multiplicity of obligations, responsibilities. So we have a lot of things that we always have to balance in the structure, in the science, in the personal. So you have to maintain some level of complexity. When you are a superstar, future Nobel Prize laureate, you can just focus on one part. Most of us are regular people, probably very talented, but regular people. And we have to do a little bit more, at least when you are doing natural science, social science, at least look a little bit on the transfer aspect of what you might be doing, because it might open you a path to a very attractive, different working opportunities. The problem is also a lack of creativity in co-workers. I started to use a question when I talk to future more senior researchers in my clinic or also outside the clinic in the faculty, and I ask a question: what would you do with 20 million euro put on the table? Because first, most people start with saying, this is very difficult to get the funding, and so the scissors in the hat for money are really high. So we start thinking what is possible, what is not possible. So with this question, I at least discover in many instances that people don't have ideas what they want to do. So many of the people I talk to, not stupid people, really good people, cannot tell me what they would like to do with 20 million euro. I'm not saying they need to spend 20 million euro, but what I say is there's an awful lot of money on the table. You can spend it for the research you want to do. And if you ask yourself whether there is something, so if someone tells you now you have 3 years off, the money you need to do your research, if you then know what you do, this is great, and at least at some points in my life, I knew what I wanted to do with this. The other fifth part, which I said, is I think we have to accept, and I had always a lot of people around me that are smarter, that are faster. One, for example, Michael Platten in Mannheim. So I took every step with Michael Platten in the past 25 years. We started in Bonn, our thesis, and so on and so on. I'm 1 year older. I'm formally probably as successful, but I admire what he's doing scientifically. But I had to accept that my pace, my way of doing things is my way. So I'm pretty good in helping people to find their best option to do science. I have good ideas. I do many things also hopefully pretty okay. But sometimes I have to accept that certain aspects, certain bigger steps, especially in basic science, are not something which is done for everyone. And this is okay. So this is at least something I have to accept. There's a big gap between meaningful and valuable science and recognition. I think it's important that you work hard to make your own science visible there where you want to have it visible. So I think for most of us, it's not the big media or the big Instagram or whatever channels, but it's important that you should at least do what you find attractive. So because it's really okay if you get some credit for your science, and it's not always a big prize, but I think we should take those advantages of present social media and everything to make our science visible. On the other hand, there's a gap between a big ego and good science, so it may not always be that you find the right balance, and I think it's important to find the right balance. Last part, and then I stop, is, and this sounds not honest, but taken from a textbook, but it is honest. I think it's always, also for a scientist, apart from his or her own creativity and strength and frustration tolerance and everything, it's important that you motivate a lot of other people to work with you on your ideas. So I had obviously a good, I don't know, outer appearance, charm, good ideas, money, whatever I had. When I was a very young physician in Tübingen, I found immediately people that wanted to work together with me. So I always had those little teams, and teams for most of science we are doing are essential, because it's very difficult to just work on your own. And if you work on your abilities to attract people for the ideas you have, regardless of which level, this is very helpful. So to attract your supervisor to spend more time with you on your project because your project is so good, or some coworker who is helping you with a certain aspect of your research because he or she is really good at something. And making this attractive to the other one because either your idea is so fascinating, or you're sharing something, or you can give something in return, is always helpful, and is a little bit of a secret, at least for me, to one or two or three of the steps I've taken so far. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this very personal speech, and I think every one of us could find themselves in this speech every once in a while. Before we start in discussion with all of you, I would like to ask Chris and Raphael to share their experiences with us.
Thanks. Maybe we can get the second mic. Number 3. All right, yeah, like we're very excited for this session because I think this is something that is not talked about enough, maybe. And the way that we interpreted the session name was just really like minding the gap between idea and publication, right? Because often this is really represented in a very simplistic way. Sorry, can you hand me the? Yeah, thanks a lot. Right, and so. How you go from the idea and publication, right? That's first, why is this process relevant? Well, because this is how science works in many ways, right? Like publications are the means to basically demonstrate in a concise way what you've done over the last year, maybe. And second, then of course, and that's the big one for example, at the postdoctoral stage, this is like a pretty big basis for the evaluation of your merit as a scientist, right? So this is this picture, right? We have an idea and eventually we get to publication, right? But most of the time is spent in between. And the problem there is it's very easy to trip, right? And so we want to share a few somewhat personal or more generic examples to basically set the stage for the discussion, right? One would be collaboration, mishaps and policies. Another one would be a day-to-day struggle. This is where most of the time is spent. And then finally, the reviewing process. And I would just start with one of the collaboration mishaps from my side. So science is very special in the way that lots of the stuff is still with an individual attribution, right? So it's not like a big company and they have a product, but often it's your name on the paper. And but however, right, like it's still great that we have institutional collaborations and they allow synergies, right? But the problem is they also very much increase the risk for failure, particularly in how project management is done in academia. And so like the big thing here that anecdotally I experience is that collaboration and member funding in academia is very, very volatile. That means, so I worked quite a few months on a project with collaborators over in Japan. He was just wrapping up his PhD thesis at the same time, and it was said that he would become a postdoc at the institute. And then this collapsed, right? So we had this project that never got realized. The PhD left the field to industry. He's now working at a cosmetics company. And but yeah, there was nobody to pick it up, right? There was a lot of time on different sites, including mine, that was never picked up. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and just to add something, Chris just mentioned there was no one to pick it up. And in my case, my first publication as a doctoral student still, there was actually someone to pick it up, but I did not ask for the piece to be picked up. Meaning that in law, we normally author our pieces by our own, and we send it out for colleagues to ask for their comments and feedback, but not for co-authorship by editing the text and these things. And this colleague or acquaintance at the time meant that his or her impact was of that significance that it was worthwhile to be mentioned as a second author. And I had some doubts about this claim, so to speak. And I was very grateful because as a lawyer, I first look up for some guidance written down on paper, and I luckily found guidelines for safeguarding good research practice. In this case, suggested by the DFG, but there are also a lot of other practices of that kind that were very helpful for me to get further guidance on what good academic and scientific behavior actually means. And even though what I found interesting to learn is that legally speaking, these guidelines are guidelines and therefore not legally binding. In my case, they form part of my workings contract. So if I breach if I breach these guidelines, I will also be in breach of my works contract and then raise or be exposed to further measures in that regard. So they can be also, I found it interesting and surprising for me at that time that they can also gain indirect legal quality.
So then the second thing is the day-to-day failure and progress. I think this is the biggest field in terms of what we spend our time on, and also where things can go right or can go wrong. Most of the time spent literature research, pen and paper, lab work, coding, etc., depending on your subdomain. And I think the description of this iterative progress where you try to improve, right, for somewhat good reasons, not all of that is reflected in your publications. And mostly you hear about this progress then by chatting to colleagues if you're in academia, or what I do a lot is like online blogs, right, where really not just failure and outcomes are reported, but also the intermediate results and the iterative process of failing in steps between. And so here, on a more positive end compared to the last example, is where we had the situation. It was as a physicist, like we do these big simulations, and it doesn't quite matter what it was, but we had a lot of data, right? And we didn't have the tools at the time to somehow work with these, and this really took us months, right? So in the end, I spent for 2 publications just half a year just writing the technical solutions, right? And this is not really part of the paper, right? Because we tried to answer certain scientific questions, right? And of course, we wrote that we had a very sophisticated strategy to do this, but it was not really, there was no. This was not really meant to go in there, right? And so if you look then at the publication record as something that's very crucial to get a job for the next career stage, this is a partially problem. And so one thing that we luckily found is that there are like more and more different formats where you can publish, right? So these, for example, here we were able to then publish this software solution in the Journal of Open Source Software. Was very helpful, and I think there are many other formats like that. So now if you write a DFG application, right, there's something that is called a category B publication, right? So now you can feed all these different things, not just software solutions, but block entries, etc. in there. I don't know how this is evaluated in the end, right? But in theory, at least you can write these kind of things down.
In my case, it was also some kind of data management, which is an unusual problem for a lawyer to have, because normally we just open our bürgerliches Gesetzbuch or Grundgesetz or whatever code you please, and somehow try to find a solution in there. I, however, in case you remember from earlier today, made the mistake, quote unquote, to apply historical method, which means you have to go to the archives. And as you can see here as an example of an archive, it looks very much like a library, except without books, but a lot of paper. And in these boxes, you have literally no idea what is in there, because also the archival OPAC does not work like a library OPAC. You just get a rough idea of the year and the parties concerned, and then you have to go through it and hope you find what you're looking for. Ideally you would do, and then you have also the additional problem of being able to read it or not, because in my case, 19th century German was written in Kurrent, the pre-version of Sütterlin, and at that time I was not aware that I'm not able to read it. So I had to learn the first of all the handwriting, because the Prussians did not use the typewriter, and additionally the new alphabet of what is Kurrent. So this was one problem. On the other hand, it was interesting to see that there's a lot of things in these files you had no idea, no one else probably had an idea that they are in there. So you can make and tell a lot of stories you were not looking for, but they came to you in the archives. So it's always a bit of a surprise to go to an archive, because you don't know what you will find there. Most likely you won't find the answer to the question you had, but maybe you can tell other stories.
So then finally, like once you've written up like something like a publication draft and you're submitting it, I think there's lots to be said about the reviewing process, which is, I think, beyond the scope of this session, really, and I don't know quite how to fix it, but like even like within the PhD, I get very disillusioned with this, and there's multiple reasons, and I just want to give one example, right? So again, right, why do we do peer review? Because we want to guarantee scientific quality of the articles, right? There's also a few negative aspects that we need to take into account, right? It's a lengthy process. There's neutrality concerns depending on who your peers are on the other side, and then also I think, right, we move to open access, so everybody can access these. That's a great thing, but it also means that there's an upfront cost, and this actually poses new problems. But the personal thing that I experienced during as a PhD was paper rejection. Right, this happens I think quite regularly. But for the reasons and how this occurred, this really challenged my views of maybe some things for some journals that seems to be partially broken. Right, so so I submitted this paper, and it got rejected, right? So, well, it didn't quite get rejected, right? So the referee wrote in this referee report, yeah, this cannot be simulated nor approximated. This, unfortunately, like this is a great paper, but unfortunately the underlying methodology just doesn't work in the first place. This just cannot be done. And so then, but when I got so this was in that referee report, but then when I actually, when I looked at the status, it just said revision. And what happened is that the editor actually, and I think this is highly unusual, like overruled the referee. And what you have to know is in certain domains, there's just one referee, right? Even for mid to top tier journals, there's just no time to have multiple referees on a single paper. So this felt very unjust and arbitrary, right? Because then we requested a new referee, and right away, right? This was a minor revision, it just went right through, and this was published, right? Which makes you think that the quality standards that we apply are very arbitrary, and so it's really like rolling the dice maybe. And not sure how to fix it. Of course, you would like to have multiple referees per paper. I don't know how to fix this, yeah. But yeah, like I think there's many problems. Yeah.
Also from the other side, so I here would like to share some experiences and impression as an editor of a journal, part of an editorial team. Luckily, I was not personally involved in that case. In case you can't read, I will read it for you. Already the first sentence should show the problem. Certainly, here's a possible introduction for your topic. Lithium metal batteries are promising candidates for high energy density and so forth. So in times of ChatGPT, I assume you have a rough idea where certainly here is a possible introduction for your topic comes from. This has been an actual case. It went viral on Twitter, but there's also an official retraction note on the Elsevier journal website. And it's a decent journal. And I wonder how that happens and can happen, because the first sentence and it's an obvious statement. So we all are beyond the gaps of our disciplines interested and somehow also highly encouraged to publish in peer-reviewed journals, because exactly for the promise in quality they allegedly give us. And in part of the editorial and peer review process is also, I would say, a very high burden and duty for the editors, if they take it seriously, to choose peer reviewers who are actually interested and experts in the field and can make the paper better and stronger, and who maybe also have no personal interest in that paper being rejected. There's a lot of other cases I could talk about now here, but we don't have the time for that, about paper retraction because of insufficient peer review process. So it's not always that bad case, but also has a positive outcome for all of us, I would say.
And that more or less concludes our input on different examples of where you might trip. I hope we have some more time for discussion now. Thank you. Three or four? Four. So one more.
So first of all, thank you all for this very personal but also general insights into this topic of failures that we all face during our research. I have a first question to you, Professor Wick. You said that, of course, and this is what we all are aware of, that we need positions to keep the good people in academia. And probably you can share some insights and in what you think how this could be achieved.
So I think the basic idea would be to, or let's put it different. So we have a professorship, and this professorship comes with some safety, comes with some support, some staffing, some office, whatever space, whatever you need. And there's potentially in most of our academic institutions not really a similar position with respect to independency, safety, and so on. And I think this needs to be created not at a level as a supportive position, but as a parallel position with a different, probably just breadth of the spectrum or intensity of the funding. So not in terms of junior, or in terms of less valuable, or in terms of dependent, but independent, but probably smaller in scope and different in the Ausstattung, in the expenses, in the funding, and also competitive. So this, from my or our perspective, would be important. Not to have this just as a position you get because you need to do the teaching, or you need to do the corrections on some thesis or whatever, but as an independent position, research position with obligations in the whatever clinic and teaching, or in your lab and in the teaching, and then competitive, and also you can use it as one step to the next step, but you don't have to use it, because we have certain sciences where there aren't enough big positions for all people that would be like to do science. And probably not even all of us want to run a big show, but they are very happy in doing things. So we have now started in transforming our clinic into those, we then call it departments. So this is, from my perspective, a way to go. So independence, own funding, probably a smaller scope, but also competitive, and also with a full spectrum of activities, not restricted to one activity. And then there may be positions, and this is the second new category, there may be positions that are restricted to some certain specification. So one thing that comes from science is always platform, that we say, okay, there are people that are really experts in running a specific machine or technology, and not just do it in terms of a technician back and forth, which not all technicians do. I'm just exaggerating, but really also develop and really are pivotal for what they are doing. And also there, we think there are capacity to create those positions.
Yeah, I think I fully agree. I mean, this is always the challenge to keep these people there in a long term. I mean, this is, I think, the main problem, that we lose so many people because of these limited contracts, and then after a few years they're gone and a whole knowledge is gone, and then it's probably, as you said, Chris, difficult to keep on going this project because the person just left. And this is a general question I want to ask you before opening up for discussion and asking all your questions you have. This whole topic of failure, how is it addressed in your field, or is it addressed at all?
Well, maybe in my field, we have a quite unhealthy relation with failure because lawyers are obsessed with failure. Every time something did not work, we have to, or we take care about it. I was once, when I was working for a law firm during my legal training, I was given a task to check a contract. And I told the lawyer, I don't see the problem. Where's the problem? That seems to be fine. And he said, oh, well, then it's perfect. And he just wanted to have that approved. And I had no idea that it was about that. But given the more structural problems you refer to, I would say in my field, it's, from my experience, rather that you are not strong enough for the system. So it's not the system, it's you.
Chris?
Yeah, I think there's very different kinds of failure, right? I think one that really stands out and that is not sufficiently addressed is actually handing out projects by a supervisor when you're still at the PhD level, maybe even early postdoc level, right? And these problems, so we do a lot of numerics and theory, right? And the professor knows where they want to go with this, right? And it's just not possible in terms of, not that along the way you might get there, but it's just the time span just doesn't work out, right? So then you're burning sometimes multiple PhD students on a project, right? And this has happened, right? Like this has happened at my current institute, also former institute, right? Where, yeah, I mean, there were really great people, and yeah, they went out not because they were not smart enough or didn't have the grip to stay in, but because of poor project management, right? Yeah.
This is possibly also one of the positions that should be introduced. I mean, this is also done, but now more and more having these project management positions, which are really necessary, because this is not, I mean, as a PhD, you do all the things simultaneously in a sense, but probably this is very much needed.
Plus, and this is, so I would fully agree to what you're saying. So this is also happening in biomedical sciences. And one of the problems there is that we should limit the number of theses and everything one supervisor can provide or supervise. And this for us as a faculty, but also for the system, is really difficult. But because with this comes a lot of quality problems, and also the likelihood that you have a thesis really properly supervised. And in addition to the project management, which I would agree to, I think more training and care about this, that we take it, and this comes with a limitation of the theses, because then you take more care, because it's more important for you to have this one or this 2 or 3 people really being successful and take care of their success. And the other failures, I think this is just what you kindly said.
Yeah, thank you. Are there questions from the audience? I think we have a mic somewhere, right?
Thank you. I have a question regarding day-to-day failures, and in principle the question how to deal with negative results publicly, in a way that I was recently asked how my PhD project was running, and I talked about all the dead ends that I was exploring, and that I always went back to the initial point, trying out other dead ends, and then the other person asked, well, isn't this also a result to report? And I said, well, I mean, I didn't really explore to that end, that it's a dead end, but I tried to just figure out where I can continue to work with. And then I really started thinking about whether it should be more usual to report a dead end. But at the same time, I talked to people about open science journals or open science in general, where everyone can easily report dead ends also, and also technical reports, and it's a huge information density going out there, and you cannot read all of it, and it's even more difficult to filter what you actually need and filter other people's dead ends. So where is the good line for reporting negative results or to deal with?
I think this is actually a good question for the medical science, because I can just speak for astronomy, right? If you're a theorist, then well, like, then it's the kind of failure of not getting to the results like in the first place, right? It's a long derivation or long computational process. Then, like for observers in astronomy, it's very different, right? Because you write a proposal to observe something with a big telescope, right? And then you observe it, and then you write it up. And usually, no matter, this is simplifying, I'm not an observer, so, but no matter how it goes, right? You observe something that is expected, and you just publish. This is like a great point for showing what's already established theory and just another nail on the head. Or the other thing is you find something unexpected, right? And then you get the theorists excited, right? So no matter the outcome, you publish in astronomy, right? So there it works. I think in the medical field, right, this is way more debatable what you should publish, whether that's everything. Yeah.
Probably you want to comment on that.
I can comment. So I think if I understood you correct, you have negative data. So you finish some part of your project and the hypothesis or whatever simply hasn't really been shown or proven or whatever. And I think this needs to be published. So unless the hypothesis was kind of a question no one has ever asked or should not ask. So there are, from my perspective, at least in my field, there are papers that I read and where I think, wow, why has this been done? Why has money been spent on this question, honestly? So probably this is my problem. But if that is not the case, and I don't expect that this was the case, I would definitely publish. And in medical science, I would even say it's important because A, you're avoiding other people asking the same question or doing the same thing. B, you have the chance of probably learning or other people learning that this specific approach is not working. So it may be actually positive data. And third, if it comes to clinical science, it's even ethically important that you publish this data. And of course, in our collaborations with companies, industry, there is a lack of transparency in this regard. So I would say, yes, it's transparent, and seeing you all as the creme de la creme of Heidelberg University and Marsilius fellows, I would say all your science is probably very meaningful and the hypotheses are great. So yes, I would publish negative data for sure. And filter, of course, you asked for the filter. The filter is basically your specialization in your field. So if you're not doing broad research, and for example, myself, we are now interested in networks in cancer, and there's not that much publications on that. So my filter would be, I look into this negative data as well and what is working there and not. I'd probably not look into many other negative. So I would say the search opportunities these days are pretty helpful. There, ChatGPT and all this is also pretty helpful because this helps you to identify what might be. And there's a group in Hanover that is doing, I can find it out for you, have it on my mobile, that is doing exactly that. So they're building a tool that is helping us for your specific field. You feed in what you're reading and what you've written, or and they extract for you on a certain level what is relevant for you in terms of publication. So they're very smart. I look it up.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Yes, next question. Yeah, thank you for the very interesting and engaging talks. I'm actually Andre's doctoral student, so I'm very junior. And I found it very inspiring actually to think together about the future of science and how maybe science should be made more attractive and more nice environment to work into and maybe to prevent also excellent people to leave science. And I wanted to bring in, I don't know, maybe more specific topic, but it's the topic of women in science. We have this leaky pipeline, and it's not only in medicine, but in all kinds of sciences that a lot of students start, and it's it's a very equal distribution regarding the gender of the students. And when you see the academic progress, or like what positions then get taken, yeah, like the more senior levels are mostly then the gap just builds up. And so my question would be, why do you think there is this gap? Is science less attractive to women? Does science not encourage women? Or how should science change, maybe? And so maybe you have specific thoughts on that also.
Well, unfortunately, you go ahead.
I can just say from my experience, what I also witnessed with colleagues, is that it just takes too long until you secure a permanent position. And I can understand that a lot of people don't want to live with the risk when they already have to care for themselves in a more or less difficult environment and to have a child. This unfortunately seems to have a more negative effect on women than to men, from what I have experienced in my community so far. That's what I can say to it, the insecurity aspect.
I mean, I don't feel qualified to answer why women don't step up all the ladders due to various problems along the way. I think one thing that is changing, at least in physics, is also it's just the number of female students in the first place, right? So when I studied, I started with philosophy and physics, and these two faculties, right? It was completely different, right? It was like in physics, it was I think that it was 20% women in physics, and it was 60% in the philosophy department, right? And so every time I would go from one lecture to another, you could immediately feel that there's quite a difference. And I think this is, so there's definitely this legal pipe, but I think especially in my subfield, right, physics, I think it's just like that pipe is leaking quite early. And I think if you look at the trend, it's moving up quite a bit for the students, even maybe not fast enough. Yeah.
So we are losing in science. We are losing, I think, with every career step. So specifically in medicine, we have now many more medical students. We have many more junior doctors, female, also MD thesis, also PhDs taken. So all these first career steps, and then we are losing disproportionately men and female. And yes, one aspect is a non-friendly, family-friendly environment, and that's why in every DFG project, everything, those measures are also most important, but we don't seem to really cover this. But what I'm also seeing is that we are losing people at more advanced steps in science in general. So this is not just, and this is now that, of course, the more vulnerable population is then more affected than the less vulnerable. So male always have been more, and so, but my impression is that the trend is downwards in general, and that's what really also made us think about those career aspects and so on, what we were talking about before. And the last part is that the way we are doing science is very competitive. And my impression is, I have a boy and a girl, that my daughter would not be that competitive. My son is very competitive. So, and he probably will also do good in science, although probably my daughter is much smarter than he is. And I think this is probably, I'm not saying yes, so if that is broadcasted, so I'm very careful. No, what I'm saying is the problem is we have a too high level of competition in science, which probably should be at least taken somewhat down towards more hypothesis and more content-driven part. But we cannot take all the competition out. So this is again about mentoring. So make the more vulnerable, more robust against this level of competition, which needs to be done, because otherwise science is not possible. So we cannot say, okay, we sit there and the others sit also there. No, it's the one who is doing a little bit more, having a little bit bigger investment in this process, and he or she will be more successful. And this is a very important aspect. So it may also come down to some mentoring aspects as well, to realize this and say, okay, I like to help you to become a little bit more resistant against this competitive environment.
Yeah, and I think this affects all kinds of diversity aspects that we have. So this is not only about female, it's also about all the underrepresented minorities that we have. And we should really take care of them. And then I think we can also here learn a lot from other countries that do much better job there. And I think this already starts when looking at the applications. So to look that, or to make sure that they are really diversity friendly in a sense, and consider different aspects. So I think this is where we should start with these things. So thanks.
Okay, my question is, right now professors have like really many jobs, like they have to do research, they have to do teaching, grant applications, sitting in committees and so on, like a lot of different works. And now you're saying, Professor Wick, that you're working on like introducing like new models besides as a professor, which is like smaller in scope, you said, but like also like the entire breadth. Do you think it would make sense to have like different positions, like a position for a person who is only or like almost only doing teaching, a position who is almost only managing grant proposals, and then a person who is like working more on science, but 90%, and like a person who is sitting more in committees, person who is doing more outreach and so on?
So, probably, I like the question because this is obviously a question that has been asked in different times over and over again and came to different solutions. So my personal impression is that this would mean a little bit of a rollback to the times in the, let's say, 20, 30 years ago, where this has been one of the, this has been a way to deal with it. The downside is that those people are dependent. So they will depend on the professor, regardless whether it's a he or she or they, whatever, they will depend. This is negative. Second, this will always be a position at this position. So you will be moved back and forth. The attraction of this position from me would be limited. But I'm not against it. So I'm saying, of course, in a unit of 100 people, having 10 those positions probably is healthy. When you are in a, I'm not sure, one of the law institutes, you have, I don't know, 10 permanent positions, and you would have, or 5, and you would have 4 filled with this category. I would have difficulties because I see the value to really also grow and also move. And this is what, from my perspective, science is about. And not just really fulfill a certain, this would be my biggest threat, that those people will just be abused to fill certain gaps and do certain things and not really be a scientist in that proper aspect. So smaller obligation does not mean they have to sit in all the committees, have to do the same amount of lecture. So, but the whole whole structure would be somewhat slimmer, but not less intense and not less attractive. You focus on networks in neuro-oncology and not on the whole neuro-oncology. This would be this is what we are thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Further questions?
I have to admit that I struggle with the term failure. I think it's a really harsh term. It's a very subjective term as well. How do we define what is failure? I think it's different for every person. It's also really relational. So I would ask you, is there a different way to frame failure? Would there be a better term for failure? And does failure also offer a positive side? Does it have a positive side?
Well, I came across a PhD of a Heidelberg professor, actually, Christian Baldus, who's doing Roman law here. And he had a section on that was entitled "On the Relevance of a Negative Result." And I really like that because it's also an answer in a way. And in law and as in other sciences, we look for answers, and sometimes the answer is also in the negative. And for me, that's not there was then not a failure, and admittedly I copied that headline in my own PhD. So I like that approach a lot.
This would be very similar to what I answered to the question of your colleague in the middle of the room. So I think a good hypothesis with a clear outcome, profound research with negative data, as you say, I think we call it the same way. And for example, in a clinical trial, all good hypothesis, yes, of course, this would be. And failure, yes, I now see what you. I think it sounds less drastic in English than it would probably Versagen sound in German. So if you have that connotation, you are right, but I don't have a proper or better term now and today, but the concept I think is clear.
Yeah, maybe there's, I'm not sure whether we need to like change the terms. Yeah, I see that it can sound very rough, but yeah, maybe there's really a way to change the connotation as well. Right? Yeah.
Maybe that's a good point to close, to use that term to turn it into positive thinking. So thank you very much again for this very interesting and also personal discussion we had. Thank you to all of you for these nice questions. And I think we close chapter 5 and open up the last one, which is chapter 6.